everybody. Let me tell you a tale of ages long past, when I put out my first and only review on the old Game Night channel, a review of the original Legend of Zelda. I'd been planning on doing a retrospective review, where I would cover all the games in the Zelda series, starting with the first, and working my way up to Breath of the Wild, since it had just released around that time. Now, with the announcement at E3 of a sequel to Breath of the Wild, I figure it's time to dust off my old project and take another crack at it. I'll start as I did back then with the original game, and the plan, as it currently stands, is to cover only the major console releases, so I won't be talking about any of the Game Boy games, Hyrule Warriors, or the CDI titles, thank friggin' Christ. If there's enough interest, maybe I'll cover them later, but for now, I'll just be talking about the original game, which is the topic of today's video, Legend of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, and if I time things right, Breath of the Wild 2. Also, this video is going to be a bit of an abridged version of the original Game Night review, so if you want to see it in all its original glory, check out the link in the description. The Legend of Zelda was released in Japan in February of 1986 on the Famicom, then saw its American release on the NES in 1987. It was created by Shigeru Miyamoto and Takeshi Tezuka, and it was one of the first game cartridges to feature an internal battery that allowed you to save your progress. It took off as one of Nintendo's most influential series, spawning a number of sequels, a manga, books containing increasingly convoluted timelines, and a cartoon.
Well, excuse me, princess.
It sold over 6.5 million copies, making it one of Nintendo's best sellers. In America, people who bought the game and sent in a warranty card were put on a mailing list, where they would receive newsletters with puzzles, jokes, and in-game secrets. This became so popular, it spawned the creation of Nintendo Power magazine. It also featured a distinctive, unique gold-colored game cartridge. Many years ago, Prince Darkness Ganon stole one of the Triforce with power. Princess Zelda had one of the Triforce with wisdom. She divided it into 8 units to hide it from Ganon before she was captured. Go find the 8 units, Link, to save her! And that is literally all there is to the plot. Triangle good! Pig bad! Link smash! And you're off across Hyrule on your high-flying adventure to collect the Triforce and save the princess. Now, I normally voice my complaints towards the end of my videos, but I'm going to get them out of the way early. My biggest issue is that this game's philosophy on telling you where you're going and what you're doing seems to be... yeah, this. It's similar to my complaint about Castlevania 2, poor conveyance. There are a couple of instances that stand out in particular. Like, to access Dungeon 8, you have to burn down this tree with a candle. How was I supposed to know that? It doesn't look any different from any other tree in the game. This is especially confusing because apart from a few exceptions, none of the other trees can burn. So far, all the candle's been good for is lighting dark rooms and fighting certain enemies. Even if you do know certain trees can burn, there's no way to know which ones they are. And these were in the days before the internet. You couldn't just look up game facts. Your only options were A. Find a friend who knew the solution, B. Get your hands on the strategy guide, which at times could cost as much as the game itself, or C. Commit yourself to burning down the entirety of Hyrule. It's okay, guys! I'm the hero! Another good one is Dungeon 7. You actually get a clue about this one from the old man in a dungeon. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Well, as it turns out, there are 3 little ponds in the game, 2 of which have fairies who will heal you to full health. You have to find the one that doesn't have a healing fairy, and then, get this, play the flute. Who the hell thinks to do that? Why would I notice a body of water and think to myself, oh yeah, flute time? There are a few other instances, but they're not nearly as bad. Another minor issue is grinding. You don't have to grind experience, but since many items can be pricey, you need a lot of rupees. The best place I found to grind is Dungeon 3, the Manji Dungeon... Okay, you had to know what you were doing. Then again, we're fighting Magical Pig Hitler, so it works. The first 2 rooms are filled with pretty easy-to-kill enemies, so you walk through, kill them all, leave the dungeon so they respawn, wash, rinse, repeat. You will spend a lot of time doing this. The gameplay is pretty simple. You've got your 2 buttons, sword and item. There are a ton of different items in the game, like bombs, the boomerang, the aforementioned flute, potions that can replenish your health, a magic wand, the bow and arrow. The bow is useless. I hate it. The only times I really used it were to kill the boss Goma, because you have to, and in the final boss fight with Ganon, again because it's required. You see, the problem is just finding the bow isn't enough, and enemies don't drop arrows or anything. You have to buy the arrows from a shopkeeper for 80 rupees. This wouldn't be so bad, except that every arrow you fire costs a rupee. Why though? How? Is Link strapping money to the ends of his arrows? I have to imagine tying a massive, colorful stone to the end of a projectile really has to mess with its aerodynamics. Oh, and best make sure you never run out of rupees, because then you run out of arrows, and you have to go back to the shop and drop 80 rupees on them again! Anyway, like pretty much every Zelda game to come after it, you can find heart containers that increase your max health, and little hearts that heal you up. There are also a couple of items that help you reach new places, like the raft, which you need to reach Dungeon 4, and the ladder, which lets you bridge small gaps. Like a bridge. Why isn't this item a bridge? There's the blue ring, which is the game's most expensive item. It turns your tunic blue and halves all damage you would take. Then there's the magical shield upgrade. It's not magical, it's just a lot bigger than the original. By that logic, behold my magic knife! You can get upgrades to the sword as well. You start out with the wooden sword, then you can get the white sword and magical sword upgrades. When you have full health, all the swords allow you to fire the sword laser! Personally, I like to imagine that when Link has the wooden sword, it's not a magical thing. He's just got a sack of these things that he chucks at people. One of the best things about the Zelda games is interacting with fun and memorable NPCs. Unfortunately, that's not the case here. There are only about 4 unique NPCs in the game. Old man, shopkeeper guy, old woman, and this monster. I'm not really bothered by this. It's difficult to make unique and interesting character models when you've got a space of maybe 8 pixels to make their face. My personal favorite is the old woman. If you get the letter from the old man and show it to her, she sells you potions. Otherwise, she just stares at you, silent, unsettling, smiling the kind of smile that clearly says, "Get out of my house or I'll unzip your skin and wear it like a coat." Totally understandable, really. I just broke into her cave house by blasting out the front wall with a bomb. That's another thing, incidentally. There are no buildings in the entirety of Hyrule. And the placement of some of these people. You'll blow open the side of a cliff, find a cave, and there'll just be some old guy sitting there like, "Hey, you want this heart thing I found?" There's no other way in or out. My boy, how long have you been in here? What have you been eating to stay alive? Even Ganon's lair is an abominable rock in the middle of scenic nowhere. The monsters, much like the NPCs, only have so many different models, so in later dungeons, many of them are colored differently to indicate a change in difficulty. The bosses are interesting, though many of them are also reused, with some like Digdogger becoming common enemies later on. Dodongo becomes so common you'll usually run into 3 of them in a room together. Dungeon 7 has actually got the same boss as Dungeon 1, with literally 0 changes. With a fully upgraded kit, he's a piece of cake, though to be fair, the first encounter was pretty easy too, especially if you had full health in the sword laser! The boss fights, though, for the most part, are pretty fun, with each one requiring new solutions, like feeding Dodongo bombs or shooting Goma in the eye when it opens. By far, the most irritating boss fight is Ganon himself, because he turns invisible and starts flinging unblockable fireballs all over the place. You just have to blindly stagger around the room and hope you fumble into him 4 times. And you don't want to die here, because if you do, you get sent back to the start of the dungeon, and Ganon's lair is easily the largest dungeon in the game, filled with the toughest monsters. When you do manage to beat him, he turns red, and you shoot him with the silver arrows. He then explodes into pixelated gore, and you can collect the Triforce of Power and save the princess. So I started out with my complaints, now I'm gonna gush for a minute. While the lack of direction can lead to some frustrations, there are some things I like about it. You really aren't tied down or forced to head in a certain direction. You want to do the dungeons out of order? Cool, you can do that, though it might not go well. You want to wander the overworld and murder Octoroks for hours on end? Go for it. You want to ignore the cave and the old man at the start and play the game without a sword? Don't do that. You will die. But it's an option. The sense of freedom really let me feel like a legit adventurer heading out on an epic quest. The land of Hyrule was my playground. Shigeru Miyamoto has stated that his inspiration for the game was his childhood, spent exploring the wilderness around his home and discovering caves, and he wanted to impart the sense of boundless wonder felt when diving into the unknown, and yeah, he did a damn good job of it. Those parts where you get stuck and can't think of the solution, they create a sense of community, because we would talk amongst each other and share solutions, so in a way, we were all going on this great adventure together. And in contrast to the parts of the game that left you in the dark, the design of that first screen is pretty genius. We start with nothing, before us, some paths and a cave. Our first instinct is to go into that cave to explore the unknown before moving on, so naturally, we are more likely than not going to meet the old man and hear his age-old advice.
It's dangerous to go alone, take this!
In the end, I would say that this game held up pretty well. It's nice to take a step back, dust off the old golden cartridge, and revisit where it all began. Anyway, I've been Tom, thanks for watching.
Link, here come to town.